namaste and welcome to Citti Media and the Festival of Bharat. My name is Sharan Setty and I'll be your host for this program. Joining us today for a conversation is Mr. Jaideep Saikia, a very well-known conflict analyst based in Guwahati. His articles have been widely read on a range of issues, and he's also a very popular TV panelist who appears on debates every now and then. Mr. Saikia, thank you so much for joining us. Namaste, first of all.
The pleasure and the honor is all mine.
The pleasure is ours too. Today we will be talking about the security situation in the Northeast because it's evolved over the last 70 years. And it looks like it's going to evolve further going forward from now, especially because of a lot of government policies being enacted over there. So as of now, how would you characterize the security environment in the Northeast?
Well, it has improved by leaps and bounds, particularly in the last about 8 years or so, 8 to 10 years. I would say that things have changed and the statistics speak for themselves. There has been a decline in violence and fatality rates have gone down drastically. And that is perhaps in no mean an effort of the government. You see, I think without actually going into the specifics, I would say the new dispensation of the Narendra Modi government has evolved a different set of policies for the Northeast, and whereby, the enchanted frontiers have been taken a little more seriously than earlier, which is not a passive value judgment on the earlier dispensations. But the fact of the matter is, yes, the security situation has improved, but there have been some cases of, where one would characterize certain aspects as alarming. For instance, I would say that the non-resolution of peace processes, which are sort of, emboldening onlooking groups, apart from the NSNIM, which is the longest running insurgency and which is in the cessation of hostility mood with the government of India, the non-resolution of, talks with these groups, making other onlooking groups wary. And as a result, you have show of belligerence now and then. The recent ambush in Churachandpur, for instance, was instance of that. So I think despite the fact that the security matrix overall have improved, there are certain things yet to be looked at closely. For instance, there is a belligerence from the north in terms of the Chinese dragon, for instance. And if you let me elucidate, I will talk about these aspects one by one.
Sure.
You see, for instance, let's compare Arunachal Pradesh, which borders China, and what happened in 2020 in Eastern Ladakh. Now, these, despite the fact that there are belligerence and intrusions and transgressions, possibilities on both the western and the eastern extremities of India, and we have seen this sort of events which sort of overcame the eastern Ladakh, primarily Galwan. There are marked differences between the eastern sector and the western sector. Let me just give you a pointed enumerated aspects to these. Number one, the terrain is extremely different. Sharanji, I mean, for the fact of the matter is, you see, here in the eastern sector, which I have had the good fortune of actually traversing there, almost the entire eastern sector, the terrain is very different. You have the Tibetan plateau, which is very different from the one which suddenly drops, and the terrain on our side of the border is, forested, undulated ravines, and very glaciated areas, etc. On the other hand, in comparison, the eastern Ladakh, you have a lot of gaps. Like, for instance, to talk focusedly on the intrusions which happened in the finger area, for instance, they were claiming finger 4 and we were in finger 8. So there were a lot of gaps. So the terrain itself lends itself to some sort of, a belligerence from the other side, and which is not very easy to sort of, replicate in the eastern sector. That is one. Number two, the elements, the deployment pattern in the eastern sector is far more robust than what was before Galwan took place. So the elements which have gone into eastern Ladakh now naturally is far more robust, but before that it was not so. And that is perhaps the reason why the PLA was able to intrude in the manner it did. On the other hand, in the eastern sector, we have two holding cores, the 3 and the 4 cores, without going into details, which are very well placed, and there are enough elements throughout the eastern sector in holding posture. And there is a talk of a strike core being raised in also in the eastern sector, somewhere in the eastern sector, without going into details of this. So, we are well entrenched militarily here for the Chinaman not to be able to sort of intrude.
Right.
The demography is different in both these sectors, the western and the eastern. Ladakh, I mean, if you look at the entire Ladakh domain, it has both Islam and there is Buddhism. But in Arunachal Pradesh, which the Chinese claim the entire 90,000 square kilometers of it, in fact, they call it Southern Tibet, is a smattering of Buddhism on the western side, that is Tawang, the Kamang sector. And then as you go east towards the Tibet, Myanmar, India juncture, to the eastern extremities, you slowly have, animistic and then Doni Polo and these sort of religious affiliations. And the most important thing, as I said, is of course the fact that the deployment pattern of the military is very different. Having said that, what is the most important security challenge? I would say naturally, the first and the foremost security challenge which sort of engenders the Northeast is from the northern borders, despite the fact that it's not going to be an easy cakewalk for the Chinaman to just come in because of the, deployment pattern and the safeguards we have taken. This is notwithstanding the fact that the infrastructure development in the forward areas is not what it should be. There was a fear during the late 60s and the 70s that if you were to build accesses, if you were to build roads and develop these, the Chinese would use these to roll down all the way to the Brahmaputra Valley. I mean, the ghost of 62 was very much alive.
Right.
So that was a concern. But fortunately, with the new dispensation, things have actually speeded up. And I can tell you for a certainty that, development of the forward areas has been speeded up remarkably. And, earlier when there is to be just one foot suspension bridge over the Lohit River in the Wallam district sector where I've been saying one man at a time, can you imagine if on the other side, there is the Madan Ridge, there is the, the hill which overlooks the Tatu and the Rima camp of the Chinese, formations. You just have 1 foot suspension bridge over the Lohit River.
Right.
But now things have changed with the government in power, understanding the imperative of developing these areas, not only developing the area by way of infrastructure, but also by actually developing the socio-cultural lot of the people who are actually, the border people, as it were. And that is why I myself have seen, for instance, the Mewar tribes, which live in the Wolong sector where I've been there, they speak chaste Hindi, for instance. Now that's a very good sign, you see, and they understand that their loyalties lie with India, with Bharat Darsh. So that is a very, very important thing. And I congratulate both the government of the day and the Indian Army for having been able to sort of, embark on aspects like Operation Samaritan, Sadbhavna, etc., so as to be able to get the loyalties of these people to our side. Because you see, it's very important. If tomorrow a hot war posture were to open up, the loyalties of the local population is very, very important for the armed forces. So that is as far as the Chinese aspect is concerned, the cartographical. But there are problems. You see, there are disputed areas, and I would refer quickly to certain places, like, for instance, the Fishtail 1 and the Fishtail 2, once again in the East Wolong sector, which, you have patrols from both India and China, sort of sometimes even crisscrossing each other. And we have had face-offs. But these face-offs have been not very violent, and they leave telltale signs, and they have gone back. Similarly, in the Kameng sector, there are disputed areas, but I particularly have been a student of one particular subsector. And I'll tell you, Sharanji, if you permit me to speak about it for a while, why this subsector is important. You see, let me digress quickly, that the entire India-China boundary is about 4,065 kilometers long, from west to east. Now, and they are divided, as you know, into three sectors: the western and central and the eastern sector. Now, the student in me tells me, and I've been part of track 2 dialogue with China. I have been to China myself in 2002 for another track 2, and then was another one in 2014, which this dispensation chose some of us to hold dialogue with the Chinese counterparts. But the fact of the matter is, this subsect, I realized soon that, the entire 4,056 kilometer boundary cannot be resolved in one fell swoop. So why not actually look at a sector or a subsector wise divide? So I came up during the dialogue, track 2 dialogue, with the concept of a line of amity. I said, since there is a sector in the Kameng sector which they do not intrude, nor do we intrude, and there is a geographical feature by way of the Namkachu River which we do not cross, nor do they cross, and they're sitting atop a place called Thagla Reach, a feature which almost approximates the watershed principle which Henry McMahon drew in 1914 during the Shimla conference. Of course, that was not accepted by the Chinese, but the fact of the matter is, that is to our advantage. So if as is where is basis can be actually cobbled out and give it to the Chinese to consider, I think the line of actual control could be converted to a line of amity, at least in this sector, awaiting, you see, negotiation for another year or so, or decade maybe, perhaps, for the next generation to take up this cause and lessen the rhetoric and the belligerence which actually follows a name like line of actual control. It sounds a little belligerent, you say. And I myself have been to the sector, and I've seen how beautifully, elegantly it lends itself to a possible resolution, or at least a change of nomenclature, which some of you might turn around and say, what is so great about the change of nomenclature? But the word amity itself, and Sharanji, you'll be pleasantly surprised that many important statesmen, generals, even think tank leaders from India, and a few from Chinese from my visit in 2002 have actually welcomed this idea, this concept. So that is one of the security concerns which can be sort of, looked at closely, Sharanji.
Right. Thank you so much for detailedly explaining the security situation in the Northeast. And it also happens that you've been working on the India-China boundary issue for a very long time now as it pertains to the Eastern sector. What is your prognosis of this matter?
Like I said, I do not believe that the Eastern sector, which is so well guarded and well fortified by our forces, you see, as I said, there are 2 cores, 3 and 4 core, sort of, with their forward deployments in the Eastern sector. So I think all is well as far as that is concerned. There would be, in disputed areas or, claimed areas, patrolling from both the sides. It's not as if only the PLA is patrolling, but our patrols also go. And that is primarily because there is a misperception about where the LSC exactly is. As far as I'm concerned, there are 2 LSCs. One is a Chinese LSC, line of actual control. One is the Indian line of actual control. And that is where the face-off happens. And in fact, when you agree, this is a little bit of hilarity here, you agree on an LSC when actually there are 2 LSCs. You see, the perceptions are so, so different. So that is the difference. Like, for instance, in Bumla, when I went, there was just a heap of stones. When the patrol goes, you just throw a stone into the heap and that becomes higher and higher. And that becomes the dividing line between India and China. I've been there for the CPMs and the border personnel meetings once. And I've seen the huge heap of stone. That is the boundary for you. And sometimes there is a nala, that is the boundary. And then, as I said, in places like the fishtail 1 and fishtail 2, you do not know where the boundary is. That is why sometimes when you're returning from a patrol onto the forward area, you come across a Chinese patrol which is returned from the Indian side.
Right.
And sometimes, and there have been stories where great bonhomie actually has happened between the two patrols. Actually sit down, share their refreshments, cigarettes, etc., and they go their way. Yes, belligerence has risen over the time, but I feel that a novel concept like a line of amity, and I'm not saying this because I'm the progenitor of this idea, but the fact of the matter is, it is something which is little non-conventional, and I think it could be considered. The first step by which it can be considered is by actually constituting a boundary commission. Now, what are the sort of personnel who would constitute this boundary commission? Naturally, former generals, former diplomats, certainly people from the Survey General of India. And I might also tell you that there is something which I'm sure you're aware about. There's something called the China Study Group, which actually ordains much of the protocols and such other aspects for the India-China boundary, including limits of patrolling. Now, I was talking to a former foreign secretary when I was holding a webinar last year in the backdrop of the Galwan incident. But the unfortunate aspect is that the China Study Group hardly ever goes to places where the disputed areas are there on the ground, and perhaps they are content with visiting places like Guwahati, and from where they can get their reports, and they hardly go to places like Kinjamane or Chatluhogam or Walong, etc., where the real problem is. And I think that should be corrected. And I believe this government is actually taking these matters quite seriously at this point of time.
Right. And speaking of China, is China adopting a different strategy as far as the insurgency in the Northeast is concerned? Because they've been providing some sort of a back-end support, whether it's with arms training or with financing them in certain regions of China, including Yunnan province. If this is the case, if there is a new strategy, what are the contours of it?
Yes, you're quite right. I think there is a sea change, if I may put it that way, in the way they have entered the insurgency game in the Northeast. During Deng Xiaoping's time, they had almost stopped the import of revolution. But of late, they have actually started cultivating some of the important leaders of various insurgent groups of the Northeast. And for instance, about a year or so ago, there was this very funny statement by the Alpha chairman, Obijit Ohom, who is no longer the chairman, who was talking about Tibet and Dalai Lama. Now, where does the Alpha, the United Liberation Front of Ohom, which is fighting for a sovereign Assam, has anything to do with Tibet or Dalai Lama? I mean, they were acting as if they were the public relations, managers or agencies of the Chinese People's Republic of China. Now that was strange.
Right.
So, yes. So the fact of the matter is, and I can tell you for a certainty that attacks which have taken place recently, we have heard about the 13th of November attack on the 46 Assam Rifles in Churachandpur. We have known about the 6 Dogra attack in Chandel in 2015. Clearly, reports which have emanated from various sources inform me that there have been Chinese planning, military planning aid for these attacks alongside, of course, Indian insurgent groups like the PLA and the NS in Kaplang, the KYKL, the KCP, primarily the Manipur Valley-based insurgent groups.
Right.
So the fact of the matter, since you have referred to Yunnan, I can tell you for sure that important group leaders of important groups are actually billeted in a place called Riuli in Yunnan. It's prefecture in Yunnan, in Kunming. So you see they are sort of billeted there. You see, after the attack pre-1st February 2021, when the Taka camp, which is near the west of Chinmen River in Myanmar, were attacked by the Myanmarese army at our behest, the insurgent groups went closer to the Myanmar-China border. And most of the leadership, as I said, are now in that area, primarily Yunnan. So from there, it is easy for the Chinese intelligence agency to sort of cultivate them and sort of, motivate them to act against India quite easily.
Right. Another question that a lot of people have been asking is that the NSEIM peace process has completed almost 24 years, yet there is no fruitful resolution. So what, according to you, has stalled this peace process time and again over the last 2.5 decades?
That's a very, very relevant question. You see, number one, I think, yes, it has already completed 24 years on the 1st of August this year, 2021, and it's on to its 25th year without any resolution. In fact, things have gone a little murkier as a result, and murkier because the interlocutor was also the governor, Mr. R.N. Ravi, who was earlier the chairman of the Joint Intelligence Committee, had to be changed very hastily without much ado, and this has been tom-tommed as a victory by the NSA and IM. In other words, New Delhi had to sort of, bow to the demands of wanting the ouster of Mr. R.N. Ravi, which really happened. But the fact of the matter is, the most important stumbling block are two. A is that they are stuck with the concept of a separate flag and a constitution. Yes, Amo. They said that we want this. And the abrogation of Article 370 from Kashmir has actually raised the fears that there could be a similar kind of a enactment, even if autonomy were to be granted or a shared sovereignty were to be granted to Nagaland. So they are quite adamant about both the flag and the constitution. But I tell you, Sharanji, what's the most important thing, which actually is the stumbling block? The General Secretary, Mr. Kwingaleng Muiwa, is a Tangkhul. He is from Ukhrul. He is not from Nagaland, as we understand the territory today. He's a Manipuri Naga.
Right.
Now, like Napoleon, who was a Corsican, and he had to do a little extra, right, to show himself to be the Bonaparte, to be the emperor. So similarly, now if tomorrow, and I can tell you for certainty, in 2001, when Mr. Padmanabhaya was an interlocutor, and there was this absurd agreement where there was an extension of ceasefire without territorial limits, the Manipur Assembly burned down, and many of the MLAs were actually burnt, and the speaker almost died as a result of the burn.
Right.
So there was mayhem in Imphal, in the valley. Now, that cannot happen now.
How long ago was this?
2001.
Right.
You see, extension of territorial limits was in 2001, and naturally, as a result of the outcry, especially in Manipur, this had to be sort of revoked. For some reason, I'm an Assamese, but I do point fingers at myself. The chauvinist, Assamist outlook did not, not too many heckles were raised, because they wanted only 2 tribal districts of Assam, primarily Karbi Anglong and Dima Hasao. So except a few token, protest march in Guwahati, nothing happened. But you see, in Manipur, the valley burnt. So the center had to revoke it. Mr. Padmanabhaya, of course, was changed. But today, Mr. Muiwa cannot go back and tell his people, his constituency, which constitutes primarily the Tangkhuls, that, you see, I have been able to work out a solution with the government of India, which does not include Ukhrul, which does not include Somdal, my village. He cannot do that. It would be extremely difficult for him. In fact, it would be suicidal for him if he were to go back and say, I have been struggling for so long, but I have not been able to get my homeland. And of course, neither the Manipur government and nor the government of India in all its wisdom is going to agree on it. So I don't think that that the Naga peace process is going anywhere. There is a huge impasse, as a matter of fact. And I want to be very frank with you that there is a thinking in certain circles that this problem might actually get solved after Mr. Muiwa, whatever that means. I mean, I don't want to get into morbid aspects of the matter, but fact of the matter is, have there been a proper profiling of the second rung of leadership of the NSA and IM taking place? If so, then we might actually have a more adamant, more vehement leadership of the NSA and IM than Mr. Muiwa. Mr. Muiwa at least was a guerrilla. He went on a 97-day trek all the way to Yunnan in 1997. But the second round of leadership, the peace dividend has paid off, Sharanji. But the fact of the matter is, they are inside Nagaland doing everything else, collecting taxes, sending their cadres to on long-range patrols. They're intruding into Arunachal Pradesh by way of Operation Salvation.
Right.
In other words, converting the Nokte and the Wanchu tribe to Christianity, by which they want a death engineering all the way to China through the Mon district by way of going through the Tirap, Changlang and the Longdim districts all the way to Tibet. And, there is absolutely disregard for the, ceasefire provisions. They march from camp A to camp B, concealing the weapons, and that is allowed. And most importantly, 24 years have passed. I joined the Rashtriya Indian Military College at the age of 11. I'll give you a small example, which is very important for your viewers. And I wanted to join the Indian Army. It's another matter that I was medically unfit and I was not able to do so, and I'm a student of security instead. But the fact of the matter is, a Naga child who was 11 years, he does not know, now 24 years have passed, whether he is an Indian or he's a Naga. The cessation of hostilities have carried on for so long that he is a knower person. He sees Camp Hebron, he sees the Naga flag, he sees the Indian Army flag on the other side. Yet he is not able to sort of discern whether he is an Indian or a Naga. So it is giving rise to a different kind of a social formation altogether. I hope these aspects actually have dawned upon the policymakers in New Delhi, because we are giving rise to a different kind of a person. I had made up my mind, I'm saying it again emphatically, at the age of 11 to serve the country as an army man. I was not able to do that for medical reasons. That's a different matter. But the fact of the matter is, a Naga child, how are you going to integrate him into the Indian nation building enterprise? Because he does not know whether he is a Naga or he's an Indian. And that is because of the inordinate delay. And the inordinate delay, you might want to say that the Nagas are responsible, maybe there's a Chinese hand, etc. But the fact of the matter is, there are certain aspects which we need to guard against, which actually we should be able to preempt from our side, from the side of the Republic of India, which also have to be taken care of. Right. So I think you're quite right. The Naga peace process has to be looked at very, very carefully.
Right. Thank you so much for that. And in fact, the Delhi disconnect has been widely spoken about, which is why some of these groups may have a certain disdain towards the policies of the government. And hopefully the bridge between the mainland India and the Northeast as a region will get stronger, and the region will be connected much more stronger with the rest of India. You have also been speaking and writing about radicalization in the Northeast. When you say radicalization, what do you mean, and what sort of radicalization are we facing from 2021 onwards? Because the security situation has again evolved differently over the last few years.
Well, radicalization actually could be from any religious denomination or any political denomination. But at this point of time, the world is actually passing through a transformative moment where Islamist radicalism is on the rise. As you know, there are 4 principal sects in Islam. There is, of course, the Hanbali sect, which is the most, rabid of the thing, which identifies itself with the Wahhabi and the Salafi, right. Then Shafi'i, and then there is a thing. And here in India, we have the Hanafi school, which is a little more moderate, But the fact of the matter is, the influences from the Islamic State, the Al-Qaeda, who are from the Hanbali sect, is slowly coming onto, India and onto places like Assam. In my travels, I have seen that, the mosques, which during my childhood were, constructed almost like, temples or namghars, as we call them in Assam, are slowly becoming, Saudi Arabian in the look, A lot of money is coming from, outside, from places like Kuwait, and there are NGOs like Al-Harman and such other, whether it is Hawala, etc. It is for the agencies to find out. But I can say that, there is a sea change in the attitude, both visibly in terms of construction, and then there are people who earlier never used the word, and there's nothing wrong. I'm not making a communal statement here, Sharanji, but the fact of the matter is, when I was a child, I never heard the word Allah, really. Not saying that, there is anything, incorrect about that. He is a supreme Lord of a particular faith, and he is, so is the Holy Quran. But the fact of the matter is, Assamese Muslims of that era never blessed me like that. They always use the word Ishwara aapka bhala kare, when they go away. But today things are changing, and I can tell you, whether it is for good or for bad, I'm not going to pass a value judgment. But Arabic is taught to children, which is all right. But what I'm trying to say to you is that there is a change in the character by which a social formation is slowly, coming to the fore. Now, radicalization has happened, especially after 1999. And I would say that the first wave of radicalization happened between 1999 and 2005, and 9/11 was the most important manifestation of that. And the second one was with the construction of the Neo-Caliphate, when the Al-Qaeda in Iraq transformed itself to the Islamic State, and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi became the Caliph or the Neo-Caliph, and sort of took over territory in Iraq and Syria. It's either called the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, or the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Levant meaning almost the entire area. Levant, of course, very interestingly comes from the word levitate, where the sun rises from the east. So, that's how it happens. But now with the territorial ouster of the Islamic State from Iraq and Syria, you have them all over the world, and primarily in what was their belief was the traditional area where the last war, almost like an Armageddon, would be fought. That is a Khorasan. That's why the new group which has been formed in Afghanistan after the takeover of the Taliban is the Islamic State of Khorasan province, ISKP. You see, that's interesting. And although reports are quite tenuous at this moment, but the fact of the matter is Taliban at that point of time, when in its first avatar, did give a lot of aid and help to the Al-Qaeda. And it is reported that Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State for the Khorasan province are thriving in the caves of Tora Bora, if not in Kabul. And the fact of the matter is that they would soon enter the Indian subcontinent. Indian subcontinent in the sense, like the whole of the Indian subcontinent is almost a truism. As a matter of fact, Waliya Hind, which is called the Guardians of Hindustan, have entered. And there was, in 2014, a televised worldwide message by the Emir of Al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri, where he proclaimed the Islamic Al-Qaeda in the Indian subcontinent, where you'll be surprised to know that he actually named Assam along with Gujarat and Bengal and Burma. That's how he said it. I've heard the entire speech, and he says that this is a place where the Kafirs, or the infidels, who are non-believers, that is, the non-Muslims, are oppressing the Qawm, and that is why there should be a war being waged against them. Now, after the territorial ouster, I feel that in the next 6 to 8 months' time, there would be a third wave of radicalization, which is going to be very violent. Violent in the sense it's going to be almost 10 times the way we understood it in the first wave, that is between 1999 and 2005. You'll see suicide bombings. First, you'll see, of course, protests against laws which are considered to be un-Islamic. You'll see demand for enactment of blasphemous laws, especially in areas where there is a domination by a minority population. And in Assam particularly, you see that demographic change in Assam, in the lower Assam districts, have happened direct result of the illegal migration from Bangladesh. Now, there is a difference between the Assamese Muslims who have come in the year 1000, with Bakhtiyar Khalzi, etc. And now, they are perhaps more Assamese than I, but the fact of the matter is the lower Assam district population, they continue to be influenced or informed by aspects from across the border. Now that is dangerous. As a matter of fact, a former governor of Assam, S.K. Sinha, Lieutenant General S.K. Sinha, was particularly close to me, actually sent a report to the then president saying that their time would come when the 4 districts of Assam would ask for a merger with Bangladesh. Now, there was a lot of hue and cry, but the fact of the matter is one had done a careful study. And the fact that many intellectuals of Bangladesh, like Sadegh Khan, etc., have asked that for Lebensraum in the east, meaning, Assam, because you see, you must understand that climate change is also a factor of security. Now, in the next 50 years or so, the Bay of Bengal, because of global warming, 1/4 of Bangladesh is going to be underwater. Now, where would these landless people go? We've had, first of all, economic migrants. The Britishers brought people, the Maiman Singhs, etc. Then we've had economic migrants. And today we have a Malthusian nightmare in the lower Assam districts, which is slowly, burgeoning. The 2021 census is yet to be, I don't know what's going to happen with that, but the 2011 census talks about 26.4% minority population, and you can imagine what has happened in the last decade or so. But the fact of the matter is, with the global warming and the aspects which will sort of accompany it, there would be something called the climate migrants. Now, climate migration, first stop is going to be again the northeast in Assam. And then after a point of time, either they have an electoral victory, and then you have, as many people say, that you have actually a minority ruled northeast, or you have a civil war-like situation. Now, these things have to be taken on quite seriously, whether there has to be a proper border management apparatus in play, which is not at this point of time. But the fact of the matter is that the third wave of radicalization is something which I feel is going to happen in the next 6 to 8 months. And I'll quickly tell you the reasons for it. Because we abut Bangladesh so closely, and because of the atmosphere of the day, whether it is in Afghanistan or Bangladesh, there is going to be an aping exercise here as well. And there are various factors, economic, social, religious, which are going to be sort of at play. And the only way which we can prevent this is, as I've been writing about, is to segregate the minority population from the ill effects. I repeat, ill effects of the radical elements. So we have to psychologically segregate them. In fact, we have to sometimes use the minority population to sort of, battle this alien agenda.
Right.
And there are other kinetic methods which one can sort of, dwell upon if necessary.
If this is the situation in the Northeast, then it's definitely a worrying development. So in terms of the security imperatives and the security policy that the government of India has been having for the Northeast in particular, what changes do you think needs to be reflected in order to catch up with what threats we face?
Yes, but before I get into the policy, let me sort of give you a little bit of background, if I may. First of all, I don't think the Northeast is a homogeneous entity. It has been so since the time, because you see, Assam was the mother state, and then slowly Nagaland broke away, Mizoram broke away, Meghalaya broke away, the Northeast Frontier Agency, which was governed by, the governor of Assam, broke away. So, a very, I would say, even a superfluous entity called the Northeast came into play. There are Northeast desks in every ministries in New Delhi. As a matter of fact, I think during 2006 or 7, the government did rethinking and actually changed it somewhat. And the Ministry of Home Affairs, which has a Joint Secretary Northeast, was bifurcated into 2. So even as there was one Joint Secretary Assam, there was a Joint Secretary for the rest of the Northeast. But again, in his wisdom, since for some reason it did not work administratively, it was brought together.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, there is as much similarity between Ao of Nagaland, despite the fact that he also owes his affiliation to tribal way of life, with a Karbi of Assam, despite again that he is a tribal. I mean, there are no commonalities whatsoever. I can sort of give you an example from, say, a Nambudiri Brahmin from Kerala. What commonality does he have with a Kashmiri Pandit, despite the fact that they come from the same religious affiliation? But the distinctions are very apparent. So, trusting artificial construct like the Northeast and trying to govern it, because every state have very different both security, social and socio-cultural and development requirements and imperatives. And it is very difficult to sort of look at the Northeast through one prism. So I do not know whether the Northeast Council has worked really all these years. And then you have the formation of the donor ministry, development of Northeastern region. And there have been very, very interesting initiatives taken that every 10% from every ministry will go to from the non-lapsable pool to the Northeast. Things have happened, but development has happened, especially in the last 10 years or so. But the fact of the matter is, much needs to be done as far as security is concerned. And for that, I think unveiling of the Northeast Security Council, which I personally have been speaking about and writing about, is the need of the hour. I can spell out the contours to you, but the fact of the matter is, it would be directly under the National Security Advisor. It would have members from every state, and it would debate and ordain and primarily advise the Prime Minister's office through the National Security Advisor on matters ranging from peace process to gun running to border management to India-China boundary issues. Right. I'm talking about security because donor and Northeast Council should be left alone to sort of look at development and such other initiatives. But security is a factor of development and vice versa. But I do not think development is possible if you have an insecure region. Much investment would have happened in the Northeast, and you have a very ambitious policy in the Act East policy. But where is the Act policy going to sort of, what is the launching pad for that? You have insurgency, and the thoroughfare is through Myanmar, which again is something which is a bit of a misnomer as far as India is concerned at this point of time, with insurgent groups billeted there, attacking our Indian security forces inside Northeast. So if you are going to be insecure, there will not be investment from, say, places like Bangalore, Mumbai, Kolkata, Delhi, Jaipur, etc. Why would people come here? I mean, gratefully, things have not come to a pass, but in the past, the recent past, every tea garden owners of Assam had to pay taxation to various insurgent groups in Assam. And that is the same with NSC and IM. NSC and IM is paying at least 10% of taxes every household. Now, if in the atmosphere which is not conducive, how can development take place? And if development does not take place, then you do not have ambitious, like the activist policy taking off. So the first imperative to my mind, although I think both security and development go hand in hand, I think you have to secure the Northeast to the point where investment can happen. Yes, Northeast is going to be primarily a thoroughfare for Indian goods to dynamic Southeast Asia, but you need containers, you need proper transportation systems, etc., throughout the Northeast. You can't just simply have goods going to Northeast. It takes a good amount of time. You need good roads. Now every road, I'm told, have to be paid for to either a particular insurgent groups or to some some such nefarious party. Now that is not on. So you need to secure the region in a robust manner for development to take off, and otherwise activist policy will continue to be, I mean, I still remember Mr. B.G. Verghese when he launched one of my books in 2008 in the India Habitat Center. He says, Jaideep, it is no point going acting east unless you really go east. Right. So I'm reminded of what Prime Minister Modi said in his very first Red Fort message to the country. He said it, of course, in Hindi. He said, "Kadam jab milegi tab tan milega. Kadam jab milegi tab tan milega. Tab maqsad bhi milega." It's so nice. I was just watching it in the television, but it remained in my mind till today. So you see, it's very important to be one in unison. The steps have to be in unison. And if the steps are to be in unison, you have to have a calibrated policy by way of security, which will define your development imperatives. It's only then tab tan milega, tab maqsad bhi milega. This is what I think our Honorable Prime Minister meant when he has talked about the Ashtalakshmi, which he said Northeast is all about.
Right. Wonderful. And, in India also happens to be at the crisscross of two important borders with Myanmar and Bangladesh. So keeping those in mind, of course, like a lot of our projects, a lot of the development, a security situation is also based on the activities around the borders. So what are your comments on what the situation is?
I'm afraid I'll have to sort of do some constructive criticism, if I may, about both these countries. I'm not sure, and I'm not privy to the details as to how South Bloc, especially the mandarins of the Foreign Office, understands the military takeover which happened on the 1st of February 2021. But the fact of the matter is, I think if aspects like the activist policy, if aspects like the ouster of the insurgent groups which are billeted there have to take place, and it did take place before the takeover, when Aung San Suu Kyi was a state councillor, despite the fact that she cautioned about surgical strikes by Indian forces inside her country, territory. He said, no, we do not want that. We will do what we want. Tell us. So I think Operation Sunrise 1 and Operation Sunrise 2 took place, and it happened. And, camps in Taka, which is in the western banks of the Chinmin River, were taken up and destroyed by the Myanmar's army. But after the 1st February 2021 takeover, for some reason or the other, and we just turned a blind eye to it, or maybe we were caught unawares, fact of the matter is the Indian insurgent groups, primarily the valley-based insurgent groups, have come into an agreement with the Myanmar's army. Yes, it was a marriage of convenience, and so that the insurgent groups can continue to stay there without fear of, of any more attacks. But the Myanmar's army are using them to oust or sort of, quell the rebellion that took place immediately after the military takeover. But that discounted the fact that they will ever be touched by the Myanmar's army at our request or at our behest. And they will continue to act with impunity against our security forces or against our population. So we need to actually have a proper calibrated Myanmar policy.
Right.
And my take, if I were to be in the place of Mr. Jaishankar, I would say, let us do business with whoever is there in power in Naypyidaw.
Right.
Yes, we are a champion of democracy, but the fact of the matter is we cannot let, a pragmatism or real politic, determine our imperatives of either warfare or economic progress. And act is policy, and the insurgent groups are holding both security and development to ransom. So if the generals are to govern Myanmar for the next 5 years, are you going to stop the activist policy? Are you going to allow insurgent groups in Myanmar to continue to act with impunity the way they acted on the 13th of November 2021 against Assam Rifles? No. If I were to be a Mandarin, a senior Mandarin in South Block, I would say I would do business with whoever is there in power in Naypyidaw. Our neighborhood first policy, yes, it talks about a peaceful neighborhood. We are at peace with everyone, and I salute Narendra Modi ji for having unfurled such a beautiful unfurled such a policy. But the fact of the matter is, realities are realities of the matter, and then that is precisely why we need to do business with whoever is power. That's an internal matter. Even the ASEAN, even Russia and China are now working in tandem with Naypyidaw. So why are we holding ourselves back? It's a good thing that we abstained during the United Nations debate. But the fact of the matter is, and I can actually work out details of these if necessary, and before the Chinese actually get into Myanmar in a bigger way than they have already gotten and leave no space for us, I think we should be there. I think our policy for our neighbor, immediate neighbor, should be there. That is for Myanmar. As for Bangladesh, I think, as far as I'm concerned, they are an ally and a friend who we helped during 1971 war against Pakistan. We liberated them, helped liberate them, and we presently have a dispensation in Sheikh Hasina who is very conducive to our nation's health. But the fact of the matter is, and I quote J.N. Dixit's Liberation and Beyond, his book, our former National Security Advisor and Foreign Secretary, he wrote a very interesting paragraph, and I might quote from memory. He says that whoever comes to power in Bangladesh has to ensure two things. A, he or she has to proclaim the Islamist identity of Bangladesh, and B, has to distance himself or herself from India. Now, J.N. Dixit, I knew him as a National Security Advisor when I was in the National Security Council Secretariat. Of course, he passed away in a very untimely manner. But the fact of the matter is the sagacity with which he put forward these two, I would say, axioms as far as Bangladesh is concerned, continues to be true, despite the fact that Sheikh Hasina is a friend and ally, and we need to empower her even more. But the fact of the matter is there are compulsions within the erstwhile East Pakistan she's unable to sort of, handle sometimes. when she was acting against Islamists, and as she is, when she was acting against Indian insurgents, which she handed over to us, she had to willy-nilly use not the Directorate General of Forces Intelligence and the National Security Intelligence, which were the two important agencies in the country, but the detective branch and the Bangladesh Police and the Rapid Action Battalion and the newly formed counterterrorism and transnational crime. Why? Because the DGFI and the NSI have an old-time network with the Pakistan Army. I have met many general officers of Bangladesh who have done their National Defense College courses, for instance, not in New Delhi, but in Quetta in Pakistan. So naturally, you know, I come from a background where I studied in the Rashtriya Indian Military College, and the old-time network, Sharanji, is very, very strong, and it's not religion mere. Sure. So you must understand these imperatives, and I'm sure the Mandarins in South Block understand this as well. For instance, why would Bangladesh suddenly buy 2 Ming-class diesel submarines from the People's Republic of China?
Right.
I think we were caught unawares. What maritime concerns do they have? And I can tell you, at this point of time, even as I speak to you, they billeted in Kutubdia Channel in Chittagong, which is about 700 nautical miles away from Visakhapatnam, which happens to be our Eastern Naval Headquarters.
Right.
And I can tell you that despite the fact that they're simply diesel-class, outdated submarines, maybe, that is not the real, that is besides the point. But you would have trainers, you would have planners, you would have observers of the People's Liberation Army Navy from China sitting inside these submarines, going on sea trials, observing our naval movements. This is not conducive to India. Why did we allow that? Or did we allow that knowing that this sort of a thing would happen? What maritime concerns do they have against us, which happen? We are a friend and an ally, against Myanmar? In what way? Why did we allow acquisition of these submarines to happen? And even they needed a triad, an Air Force, an Army, and a Navy. They don't have a Navy. We could have given them one. Why did they take it from our arch enemy, China? Now, some people have tried to question me when I put this up in debates that, well, you know, it doesn't really matter because these are outdated diesel submarines. You see, Sharanji, it's not a question of outdated diesel submarines or whether they are nuclear submarines. But the fact of the matter is, a friend and an ally under a very nose acquired pieces of armament under a very nose from our arch enemy. Now that doesn't augur well. In other words, that is messages that Bangladesh is trying to sort of somehow balance India and China, you know, in its matrix. Now, if that were to be so, and if tomorrow, God forbid, Sheikh Hasina is no longer in the picture and somebody else comes into the play, then what would happen? And we have seen, I have read history to an extent that, you know, there have been, you know, coup d'etats, etc., that, you know, since 71, a good number of years have been in the hands of anti-India agenda, whether they were in the hands of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party or with the military dictatorships. It can happen again. Now, in all its pragmatism, I think India needs a well-founded, pragmatic, calibrated, comprehensive solution policy for both these countries. Right. At least both these countries. China is, I mean, I hark back to what a former defense minister said long back, George Fernandez, that they are enemy number one. We're not going into the value judgment of these aspects, but what are we doing about two important, crucial neighbors for which we can do certain things, but we are not doing anything at all about. That is my concern as a citizen of India.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing your observations. And since we are speaking about China, it's also important that we touch upon the cartographic issues that we are facing with them, because not just with India, but the Chinese do have some sort of a special skill to just cook up maps and claim certain territories as their own. And this has caused a huge issue even in the eastern sector as far as the India-China boundary is concerned. So what are your observations and what are the realities today? And with that, we'll conclude.
Well, like I said right in the beginning, they claim the entire 90,000 square kilometers of Arunachal Pradesh as southern Tibet. They have made no bones about it. And maps have been exchanged only as far as the central sector is concerned.
Right.
The western sector, there was some move to exchange it, but they gave it back. Eastern sector, which is perhaps the most contentious one, there has been no talk of even exchange of maps, despite the fact that, I would say the intrusions at this point of time are far and few between. And you were very right. They are very adept at, cartographical, subterfuge, if I may use the word. They will say, well,
right,
this is where China is, because they consider the entire Arunachal Pradesh to be theirs anyway. And tomorrow, if there were to be a talk, they would say that, well, we are right all the way to Misamari. We are all. In fact, in 1962, you'll remember that the Chinese army had come all the way to the foothills. For some strange reason, they retreated back to the Thagla Ridge. Atop the Thagla Ridge, which almost approximates the watershed principle of Henry McMahon drew during the 1914 Shimla conference. That is precisely why I am trying to sort of find a midway solution by putting forward this concept of mine, which has gained some currency in recent times among the cognoscenti of India, that the line of actual control in a particular subsector in the Kamang sector should be converted into a line of amity. Is various basis. The Namkachu lends itself, the Namkachu River lends itself as a natural feature, and they're atop Thagla Ridge, and we are on the southern banks of the Namkachu. And I have visited the place physically and have spoken to the field commanders, and they have said that there have been no intrusion in that place. And there is a Thagla gap in between, which is like a no man's land. And I do not think that there is a face-to-face, eyeball-to-eyeball contact with the China man either. So I think for by way of even a Gadankan experiment, this particular concept can be taken forward by instituting first a boundary commission, which would have people from the army, people from the foreign service, people from the Survey General of India, people from the academic world, in order to actually examine and study this concept.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And a lot of our audience will actually love and find very interesting about what you had to say. And of course, I've been reading all of your articles for a very long time now. And I've had the privilege and the honor to listen to many of your lectures as a student. But thank you so much. We covered a wide ambit of issues today, and hopefully you can join us again for a conversation, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharan.
Namaste. Thank you so much for joining us at the Festival of Bharat. And to all our viewers, please do let us know what you thought about Mr. Jaideep Saikia's observations on China, on the security situation in the Northeast, on Bangladesh and Myanmar, and a whole range of things that were spoken about tonight. And please do subscribe to Citti Media and the Festival of Bharat. This is me, Sharan, Setty, signing off.
Namaste. We hope you enjoyed this Citti Media content. Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.